Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got a compilation of r/BoomersBeingFools. Think of this as a good way to get caught up on past videos that you may have missed. Also, don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code Oz at checkout. It's a great way to support the channel, and yes, they do have caffeine-free versions for those of you who want to support the channel but don't want caffeine. Boomer neighbor wants to tell me how to use my property, so I tell him to stop using it. Boomer story. A few years ago, I lived in a boomer subdivision. In the 4 years we lived there, I would take my girls on walks, and there were 2 other families in the entire subdivision with kids. The rest were all retirees and angry, still-working boomers. When the kids would ride their bikes in the road, we'd get yelled at for being in the road. When they rode on the sidewalks, we'd get yelled at for being on the sidewalk. If they picked a dandelion from a yard, we'd get yelled at for messing with their landscaping. Everyone was so entitled. So, my neighbor was an old retired army man who did whatever he wanted, and people never said no apparently. He didn't like the trash pickup because it would damage his lawn, so he would just put his carts on my property. He would get political signs and put them in my property. His fence was too short on the side of his house to have a gate, so we had one on the side facing my property and would take everything through my yard, including his four-wheelers, his lawnmower, etc. I'm of the opinion that a yard is just a yard, so I don't really care, but I had my trees maintained professionally, had lawn care, kept my yard mowed, and generally didn't pay much attention to his complaints other than to say, okay, I'll keep an eye on that. Now, you see, my wife has absolutely no spatial awareness and is a terrible parker. She's the type that pulls forward into a parallel spot and leaves the tail sitting halfway out on the edge of oncoming traffic and thinks that's okay. The type that pulls into a spot and somehow gets wheels on every line. The type that, at our house, would pull into or out of our 3-wide slanted empty driveway but still always found a way to take one wheel through the grass, resulting in a ground-up mud spot right at the bottom of the driveway where it met the sidewalk. This was it. This was the most terrible thing that my boomer neighbor could imagine happening. One day, mid-November, I got home from picking up the kids from school and my oldest, 7 at the time, hops out and saw him putting up one of those electric trees in the front yard for Christmas time. His wife was super sweet, and she wanted it, so he would do it even though he hated to do anything remotely joyful. My daughter, standing on my driveway because I told her not to approach them unless they use the sidewalk, told him how she loves the lights when they put them up. He immediately rages at her, and then comes up to me on my driveway with my arms full and tells me that he won't be having any more of that mud, and it's making his yard a mud pit and women shouldn't drive anyways. And if I won't fix my wife's driving, and he'll just get a truckload of rocks and dump them on my driveway, so we won't use it anymore. I'm already livid at him, yelling at my child, but I happen to have had enough of his complaining a couple months ago and had gotten an official survey, so I tell him to stay right there. We'll talk more in a minute. So I take the girls inside, get the extra copy of the survey I had just for the occasion, and take it outside and hand it to him. I then explain how he can feel free to dump as much rock as he wants on his own property, but I take a few steps forward onto the lawn and show him exactly where the line ends. I then tell him if he takes one step over the line from now on, I'll have him trespassed. I then point out that his gate butts up against the actual property line so he can't use it anymore, and that my driveway is mine and he can't use it anymore, and that if his trash bins end up on my yard again, I'll call the city and have them removed and he can go down and get new ones. Now he's beet red and tells me I can't tell him what to do with his gate, and how is he supposed to mow the lawn or get his four-wheelers out? I just shrug and tell him, try me. That was the last time we ever spoke. About a year later, some guys came out to do some work on his house and they were going up my driveway and I told them no, you have to use his property, and gave them the history. I could tell they were annoyed at me for making their life harder, but they ended up having to drive their big-ass lifter through his lawn and ground up all of his grass, going up and down that hill multiple times, and honestly, it just felt good watching his lawn become a mud pit. We moved a couple months later, and though now it feels petty, before we left, I left a card at his house that said we appreciated how kind his wife was and hoped his new neighbors would treat him with as much care and respect as he had afforded us. I saw him at Home Depot this morning looking grumpy as ever, and it made me want to post. And it was in that moment that he finally learned that his actions have consequences. Yeah, he fucking deserves that for yelling at a child, seriously. Wow, those Christmas lights are really pretty. Fuck you, kid. Oh, by the way, your wife shouldn't be driving because she's a woman. Like, dude, what were you expecting? Good on him for standing up for his family and actually putting shit in perspective. I do find it funny they moved out a couple months later and, oh, the icing on the cake of the lawn being turned to mulch by a contracting company. Oh, that's just wonderful. And that's the thing. If he was nicer, I'm sure that the homeowner would not have had a single problem with them using his driveway in the instance. But it's amazing how things can eventually turn right back around and bite you in the ass. Glittering Major 4871. Boomer gave my son with celiac food with wheat on purpose. Boomer story. 9-year-old son went to a sleepover. Because he's celiac, I purposefully packed snacks and breakfast for him. His friend lives with his parents and granddad, and as soon as the granddad hears about the allergy, he starts going on about how these allergies didn't exist when he was a kid and blah blah blah. I show up the next morning and my son is throwing up green. The mom apologetically tells me that the granddad purposely switched the breakfast to one with wheat. I'm normally mild-tempered, but I did yell at him, and he can't let go that I used an F-bomb. Anyways, the mom apologizes a few more times and I spend the rest of the day nursing my son back to health. Update. I spoke to the mom and she agreed I should press charges. We're pretty good friends. I feel she's pretty sick of his BS too, and this was the last straw for her as well. See, I know that he knows he's in the wrong when his main concern is the F-bomb. He's trying to find a reason where he can find the moral high ground on this, and it's the fact that, well, it doesn't matter that I poisoned your son. You used the F-bomb while yelling at me. That makes me the victim here, not you. Also, kudos to their parent for actually stepping up for, her friend's son and, not putting up with the bullshit. She probably realized really quick that there could be some serious charges put against her, and yeah. My only problem is the moment that she found out that there was an issue and wheat was fed to the kid, there should have been a call placed immediately to the mother. But besides the point, I'm happy the son is okay. Rico Pico got yelled at for using Control+F, also known as the find hotkey. Boomer story. I'm working for a small family business owned by boomers while I go back to school. They have some unusual ways of doing things and are generally fearful of technology. To track employee time off, they have a spreadsheet with every day of the year along the top row, oh no, and a list of employees going down the column on the left. They were showing me how to use This is a large spreadsheet, so I use Control+F to find the employee in the list. Ensue frantic yelling. Don't do that! Scroll! Scroll! I ask why, to which they respond, I just don't like that. I explain how Control+F works, which they are not interested in. They go on to explain to me that it will delete something. It is at this point that I learn they spend hours manually entering every day of the year into the spreadsheet and are afraid I will delete some of those dates. I stand up from the desk and politely offer them the driver's seat so they can scroll to their heart's content, which they gladly accept. Okay, look, real quick, part of my background, back before I switched over to doing YouTube, is I used to do software development. And my first job was I used to do database architecture and having I'm trying to think of how to put this in simple terms here. I used to make software that would pull data from an SQL database, and SQL is just a language that's used to query a database, and convert that into either PDF or Excel depending on what the user wanted. Eventually this turned into PowerPoint and a lot of other god-awful things that I don't want to talk about, but yeah. That software was designed for essentially boomers in the military. And the amount of times that we got questions and support tickets based around Microsoft Excel and its usage and not our software was... oh my god. Look, anyways, all I'm saying is this is extra painful because I've worked with boomers and technology and this shit can get messy. Now also, I do want to add that I understand that not everyone is technologically literate, especially with new technologies. But I, someone who in high school was forced to become Microsoft certified within their Office suite, from Access to Excel to PowerPoint to Word, all those things essentially getting me ready for the workplace. This was a graduation requirement for my high school. If a boomer is trying to show me something and I have an easier way that can save them hours and I try to show them and they tell me, no, you don't know what you're doing, I don't know if I would want to continue that job if I'm going to be honest with you. There is nothing wrong with being technologically illiterate, but when someone wants to help you, don't push them away. Where am I? 312. This one's coming from a Gen X. Using Control-X or Control-V is hacking, got reported to boss. I initially posted this as a reply to a great post from yesterday. This is the Control-F post, but felt it had enough potential that it could possibly stand on its own as its own post, edited very slightly for context. Reading yesterday's post brought up some deep-seated PTSD from a job I had about a decade, 10 years ago for people who are saying I can't math, ago. Some old bitch sat in the cubicle next to me. Let's call her Virginia, because that was her name. Complained to my boss that I was hacking because I was regularly using Control-C, X, and V to copy-paste things, or Control-Tab to navigate tables. This old baddie would take the mouse and click to go from field to field. I may be a lot of things, asshole is one of them, but computer virgin I am not. I used to work in hospital pharmacy in the late 90s, early 2000s on terminal-based systems. Oh god. There was no GUI, graphical user interface. Hell, there wasn't even a mouse. You must learn the keyboard shortcuts. But since she was 50 years older than I swear she was like 900 years old, I must clearly be cheating. The fact that I, a 35-year-old pharmacist at the time, was more proficient in the medical record computer system than she was, despite her 40 years of company service, remained a complete alien concept to her tiny, smooth little brain. The boss did come by, stared at me for a while, and just walked away shaking his head. He never brought it up during our one-on-ones, but this wasn't the first time that horrible woman tried to throw me under the bus for, check notes, doing my job. Boomers don't understand that some younger people actually have a work ethic. We just prefer to work smarter, not harder. If we were in the Dark Ages, she'd probably try to have me burned as a witch. Fuck you, Virginia. You are the reason your husband left you with your kids and you don't see your grandchildren. Oh my god. I feel much better for getting this off my chest. So, because I went to a tech high school, which means that basically part of their education was focused on technological literacy, we had to learn how to use IBM mainframes, and oh my god. As an entire side tangent, and this is really more of me just ranting on this, it does bother me a lot that Gen Alpha and Gen Z, it's being reported that they don't know how to navigate modern computers. And this is coming from the simplification of things like phones and iPads. They don't know how nested files work and other things along those lines. That deeply worries me because computers are an ever-evolving part of our life, and the simplification of them is good in some ways, but bad in others. Adding a mouse and modern GUI so you don't need to navigate through terminal commands, or, God forbid, the console. I'm looking at you, Linux users. That's a good thing. But the Fisher-Priceification of modern computer tasks being essentially simplified to their bare bones for Gen Z and Gen Alpha really worries me. Like, they're very fluent in internet culture and technology culture, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to computer operations and computer tasks, there is a recorded growing technological illiteracy within that generation, and it does worry me. Ol' Hickory. Boomer neighbor now in jail because she thought she bought a view and quiet in a subdivision. Boomer Freakout. Boomer lady that lives 2 down from me. Bought early in our neighborhood. There were 2 empty lots by her. It's a golf course community. Her property, however, only backs into some woods between holes. I bought the property 2 down that sits in the green. She could see the green when the lots were empty, but after the houses were built, she could see less, but she could still see. The lot between us sold and a family moved in. They and us have 5 little kids. We both had the builder put in a fence. The fence was installed into the buffer zone between the golf course and our property owned by the HOA. Almost every other house in the neighborhood has a fence or bushes in the buffer. It mostly exists for the drainage. Only rule is no structures in it. Me and the other new house have a few kids each. They play outside, but much less than I did their age, but some. Lady is pissed we built houses in empty lots in a half-finished subdivision. Says we stole land for our fence. She also thinks she's entitled to country quiet living on an O2 anchor lot. She starts harassing me and my neighbor. First, little things. She turned me into the HOA for something in my backyard, which puzzled me. She called the cops because the kids were playing outside at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. She filed a complaint against our realtor. The neighbor, on the other side, abruptly moved. Probably another story there. She really took it out on the wife next door. She was afraid of the husband. They ended up getting a restraining order, but she doesn't stop. She walked into their yard and filmed them through their windows. They got her arrested and charged with a felony. Was offered a deal if she'd sell and move, but she wouldn't take it, and out on bail started screaming at the kids in the backyard again. Bail revoked and she's in jail. House is now for sale. Too long didn't read Boomer's in jail because she thought she owned 2 empty lots next door and went insane when she realized she didn't. In a lot of developing communities, oftentimes they'll give you a big massive disclaimer on the closing that the current state of the developed community is not the final state and you're going to have construction and noise nearby. They also heavily warn you that if you're buying for the view, it might be blocked by incoming houses being developed. So she didn't read her contract, because I guarantee that was in her because that's usually there so the HOA doesn't get sued, nor the developer. Plus, if the HOA allowed the fence, chances are they've already done their paperwork to make sure the fence was actually allowed. Now, her yelling and screaming at the kids and filming through windows, yeah, she got what she deserved being in jail. Also, I find it wildly ironic that a lot of older generations, like kids these days, only want to be on their phones and their iPads. Wait, kids playing outside at 3 p.m.? They should be inside! What the hell? Meanwhile, they're all inside on Facebook and reposting AI Jesus images of, oh, this kid built a Jesus statue out of soda cans and shrimp, like, because it's also his birthday. You haven't seen any of those, that is definitely a hell of a rabbit hole to go down. Boomer mad I won't let him screw us over on an old house his father built. Boomer's story. Long story short, we bought a house from a son whose father built it and died here, almost 60 years. Before closing, he goes on a long rant about the shed out back that he and his father built and blah blah blah. He says he wants to have the shed removed because of sentimental reasons. Whatever, I agree. Flash forward a few months later after closing, the first week we're here it rains. I discover a roof leak from the garage. No big deal, the roof is 10 years old. Looks to be in good shape, so probably just needs a repair, right? I call a roofer who tells me although my roof looks like it's newer and in good shape, it was installed completely wrong. A list of stuff wasn't installed correctly. I text the old owner and ask him who did the roof. He says that he did. Mind you, I thought 10 years ago they had a roofing company replace it like most people do. Anyway, I tell him our less than 10-year-old roof is fucked. It needs to be totally replaced to the tune of $18,000. I tell him he's fucked up for not telling us that he did it and he knows it wasn't done correctly. No starter, ice and water, a few other things. He was aware we're getting married that fall and we're saving for the wedding in addition to buying a house. I tell him if he's a Christian man like he claims, he should do the right thing and kick in for the roof to be done right. Mind you, he sold this house for $350,000. No mortgage on it. And the house on the side of it, his aunt owned for the same amount. This scumbag had the nerve to tell me he's not going to do that. So I say fine, I'm not going to keep my end of the bargain of him arranging to have the shed he wants moved. He loses his mind. He writes me a 2-page email how he's going to turn all the boomer neighbors against us, the young couple on the street, and a bunch of other crap of how we're terrible people and stole memories he made with his father. I told him in a short reply he can go fuck himself. If the neighbors are going to be on his side, that's fine. They can fuck themselves too. He got a taste of his own medicine and couldn't deal with it. Boomers equal the greediest, nastiest, lying, entitled scumbags I have ever met on this earth. I could never do anything to a young couple starting a family like what this scumbag has done to us. The guy is wealthy, mind you, and still feels entitled to fuck kids starting out. Note, we did have it inspected, and from what the inspector wrote visually, it looked good. Not really interested in going after the inspector. He did a decent job and found stuff we didn't. More or less told this scumbag the shed is ours now. We paid for a new roof already. The shed is probably worth $9,000, half the price of the roof, so it makes me feel better about this situation. This might be the first time where I don't think the boomer's in the wrong. Genuinely. You hired an inspector, the inspector did not do his job, and you tried putting it on the previous homeowner after you had already signed off on the house. From the verbiage you stated, you had it inspected. You hired the inspector. It would be different if he hired the inspector and had an under-the-table deal to get things done and it kind of, screwed you over in the process, but it sounds like you hired this inspector, the inspector didn't do his job, you had a roof leakage and you tried to pin it on the previous owner. That's not how that works. Then on top of that, you went back on a previous agreement because your inspector fucked up. I think you're the asshole here. Genuinely. Yeah, the boomer might being boomer and is a little entitled here, but at the same time, you're equally as entitled as he is. And what the fuck is with that Christian guilt shaming, dude? If you're a Christian, you'll pay for my roof leakage that my inspector didn't find. But my inspector, he's a good guy. So I'm not gonna go after him. Instead, I'm going after the previous owner. Yeah, it sucks that he lied to you and told you that he had the roof professionally done when he did it himself. However, the inspector should have found that because that's his fucking job. I feel weird about this because this might actually be the first time where I'm siding with the boomer. Coffee Ape. Boomer mad because I didn't connect her computer to her home Wi-Fi. This episode's just full of tech nightmares, ain't it? Boomer's story. Happened a few years ago. Boomer at work, who has been requesting a new laptop, finally received one. After prepping it, I met with her at work and got her set up on it. Logged in, signed into all apps, synced OneDrive, the whole shebang. I got her hooked up to the work's Wi-Fi too. She was going to finish her day remote at home. She was happy. I gave her good customer service, the kind that a lot of boomers like. Now, tell me why this fool calls me back an hour later, livid, yelling that I'm delaying her work and forgot an important thing, connecting her laptop to her home Wi-Fi. I put that shit on speaker and asked her again what was the problem. My team was cackling. Coffee Ape, why didn't you connect her laptop to her home Wi-Fi when you met her here at work? Don't you know her Wi-Fi password and SSID? She overheard that and thanked my coworker for calling me out on my short-sightedness. I told her I wouldn't know that to begin with, and that's the problem between her and her ISP, if she forgot her home Wi-Fi password. She said, and I quote, "Aren't you my internet provider?" I checked out. I told her to call the cable man and talk to my boss for a complaint. She fired off an email to her boss and my boss. Her boss stops by and hands me a bag of M&Ms a few days later, apologizing on the boomer's behalf. My boss didn't say anything to me about the incident. My coworkers gave me shit for a few months, and that was funny. And yes, if you're wondering, you can technically preemptively connect a device to a network it doesn't have direct access to. It's a bit of a finicky pain in the ass, and I've personally never had luck with it, but it is possible. The problem in question comes down to the expectation that he would have known the home network's Wi-Fi, and honestly, the problem here isn't even the boomer asking him to connect her computer to her home Wi-Fi, because that's something that she probably would not have known about. The problem is her trying to write him up for not doing it after he explained that it was not within his purview of something he could do. That's where the problem arises from. Again, it's okay to be technologically illiterate as long as you are willing to receive help. But also this goes both ways. If you are dealing with someone who is technologically illiterate, you gotta be patient with them, as frustrating as it can be. I mean, hell, when I used to do community service in high school, one of the things we used to do is go to retirement homes or just general care facilities and help the elderly with their computers. And oftentimes we were being brought, like, these old laptops with Windows XP on them and having to walk them through basic steps like connecting to the internet or opening a browser or just general tech support help. And yeah, it can be definitely frustrating telling the person 5 times to do the same thing over and over again. But again, they did not grow up with that technology, and I understand that. And it was always something where, even as frustrated as I gotta keep a kind face. And it always pissed me off when other kids who went to my high school or were helping the elderly got frustrated or annoyed and were aggressive and mean about it. And that's not okay. It still haunts me to this day that there was some poor elderly lady who brought in their laptop and needed help with their printer, and I could not figure it out for the life of me. That thing was fucking possessed, I swear to God. After like an hour of trying to help this poor old woman print photos of her grandkids, and she had wheeled down her laptop and printer, and I tried everything, I could not figure out what the hell that printer was on. All about chemistry. Boomer furious. I didn't correct him misgendering my baby. Boomer Freakout. I was at the supermarket finishing up my groceries when this old man approached my baby. She was kicking like crazy and lifting her foot to try to chomp at it. Now, here's the thing. Her stroller is yellow with giraffes on it, and she was wearing a light green onesie. This man comes and says, "Hey there, big boy. Are you gonna be a soccer player? I think you will. Look at him kicking. Are you a Madrid's fan?" And kept going about the Madrid soccer team. I just smiled and went away. On another haul, I didn't realize he was behind me and I was talking to my baby, calling her by her name. He came to me and tapped me on the shoulder. "She's a girl?" "Yeah." "Why didn't you say something?" Now, I was going to say it didn't matter, they all look the same at this age. She's just too happy with people engaging and talking to her, plus she could be a soccer player too. But I only gotta say, it doesn't matter. And he started screaming at me. "This is the problem with you radical leftists. You should be ashamed of yourself. She doesn't even have earrings. How can people know she's a girl? You and your people want to create an army of trans people to destroy traditional families." At this point, I already started walking away and not engaging because I've learned that from you folks. He still said something about someone needing to call social services on me. When I was paying, the cashier asked what the fuck was going on, and I explained. She said that she and her manager are pissed because this guy already yelled at a group of customers, the other day being a group of teenagers. What a sad existence, going out to yell at strangers. Shrug emoji. Added to add the best part that I forgot, he also yelled when I was leaving, girls should wear pink at all times, like WTF, my dude. I could maybe understand if he was embarrassed by it and just trying to be really kind about it and being like, hey, like, I'm sorry for getting, like, the gender of your baby wrong. But instead, the whole tirade and then also talking about babies getting their ears pierced. Please tell me that's not a regular thing. Because that seems wrong on like multiple levels. Like beyond the pain you're subjecting the child to for their earrings, the second thing that comes to mind is if that baby has a metal allergy, and while rare, still possible, they have no way of communicating with the parents that something is wrong. Are they crying because they're hungry, their diaper's full, they're tired, they're cranky, they want to do something else? You got no way of knowing that they're crying is from the ears. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong and it turns out that getting babies' ears pierced is extremely common and I'm just like the weird one here, but to me that sounds odd. That sounds really, really odd and like not okay. Also, if it's not wearing pink or blue, I'm probably just going to upfront ask if it's a boy or a girl because I got no way of knowing. All babies can like animals and giraffes and wear the color green. No one really knows. Maybe that baby just likes green. Maybe they don't cry as much when they're wearing green. I don't know. Do babies cry when they're wearing colors they don't like? God. Posted by Hey Just Wondering. Boomer embarrassed his group of regulars into not returning. Boomer's story. I work for a little bistro/coffee house kind of place that's primarily staffed by college students. We're not strangers to unpleasant assholes who want to make service workers squirm, but I'd like to tell you about the old timers in particular. Now, I haven't been with my job for all that long, but knowing your regular comes quickly. The Boomer Breakfast Club was nobody's favorite, but they were mostly quiet except for one. Mr. Problem Boomer has been a jackass for a while now. You know the type, the kind to make comments about how we should consider becoming a bikini barista place and then sputters when one of our lads says he'd prefer if he could have booty shorts instead. The kind that bitches about the music being too loud and demands that it be turned off during their visits. The kind that barely buys anything and tips even less while taking up prime real estate for hours. You know, classic. The others had the decency to look embarrassed or annoyed about him, but never really shut him down. About a month ago, he finally crossed the line for the last time. He made a frankly gross remark about one of our gals and how she looked in her work-appropriate outfit while she dropped off their coffee. It made the poor girl's skin crawl and she stayed in the back for as long as possible that day. When she scooted to the back and told the main manager, MM, what had happened, the manager just asked which one it was. MM slides up with a smile and tells him that she doesn't expect him to apologize, but that he will not be speaking to any of her workers like that again. He was left actually shaking and looking confused. I'm guessing that no one had ever told him to shut the fuck up in a customer service accent before. I'm told that they whispered amongst themselves for a while, and Problem Boomer's brother hissed at him to be decent and apologize, but he refused and then slunk out the door. We've seen no trace of them since, and honestly, good. Shame is a wonderful thing sometimes. Gotta love it when the customer service voice, something that's used and has been adapted to essentially appease people like this, is then weaponized against them in such a very fun way. Like, it has similar venom to a mean girl's compliment, but it actually has weight to it because it's unexpected, out of left field, and done by someone that usually is supposed to be serving you. And oh god, is it a treat and a delight when it can be used like that. Part of me wonders if this boomer in that group thought of himself as almost like the class clown, like, you know, the peak of comedy, the king of the laughs, and, you know, everyone just kind of tolerated him. And he kind of just went a step too far with one of his quote-unquote jokes, and, you know, the shame got a little too much for the group. Honestly, it would have been really telling if they just showed up without him. Do Silver 4644. Boomer mother doesn't like being reminded it isn't her house. Boomer story. My boomer mother lives with me and my spouse because she's retired and can't really live alone. Her brother-in-law, my uncle by marriage, is also a boomer as well as a horrid person. He is proud of being incredibly racist, made fun of my cousin who was killed for being gay, and made derisive comments about his daughter-in-law's weight after a difficult pregnancy that nearly killed her, and caused my cousin to permanently cut ties with him. As for my own interactions, when I first met him at 12, I made a stupid joke at his expense. He was irritated and had the completely reasonable response of taking a large swig of beer and spitting it in my face. So, onto the story. He called my mother last night and I excused myself because my mother always talks on speakerphone and I knew I couldn't be civil to him. At dinner, I asked why he even called and she said he had some questions, that he was going to be retiring this year. Then she mentioned how he was considering taking a trip to our area, and I knew immediately where it was going. I very directly declared he will not be staying in my house. She made a really ugly face and asked why the hell not. My spouse piped up to say that he agreed with me and that my uncle is not welcome in this home. When we said we thought anybody who thought racism was great or that spitting on children was acceptable would never step foot here, she got loud and said she had no clue what we were talking about. I told her of my encounter and then she says, "Well, if I had been there." You were there. You tried to excuse it as how he didn't know how to deal with girls because he only has sons. And so she yelled about not remembering any of it before leaving the table. She grabbed her phone and began texting. She always uses voice to text because it's hard for her to see the letters. We both know that she must have been telling him what we said, which is why she didn't use it. I fully expect her to press the issue and try to make it so that he just shows up, thinking we will relent. My spouse and I both agree that if he shows up, we will label it trespassing. Edit. I should mention that we've had multiple other family members stay with us on various occasions, at her behest or ours, and never care usually. So she sometimes thinks of inviting people as a given right of hers. Edit 2. So many people asking why I let her live with me or that I should kick her out. I appreciate how supportive you all are, but I won't do it. I know it doesn't make sense to many, but I truly love her, and most of the time she is not this horrible. She was not a great mother, no. There was quite a bit of abuse, both physical and mental. Years of therapy have helped me navigate a lot of it and come to terms of where I will never forget it, but I'm willing to move past it for my own mental health. Anyways, if he shows up and says she promised him a place, then we'll have stronger words about it, but this is not that moment. God damn, I swear, if there's any minor inconvenience, Reddit's first response is, "Kick them out! Go no contact!" Every fucking time. It is incredibly easy to be on the outside and say go no contact, but I guarantee if the roles were reversed, they would hesitate as well, because that's just human nature. Sure, the obvious answer is right there, and sometimes going no contact would definitely solve a lot of problems, but it's also going to create a lot of problems too. Also, good on OP for standing up for themselves and actually putting a line down that the brother-in-law will not be visiting for his remarks and past behaviors. Good shit. Keep him at, well, I would say an arm's length, but honestly get a 40-foot telephone pole and poke him away from there. Digital disimpaction. Saw one in the wild today and had to share. Boomer Freakout. Every Sunday morning, my husband and I go grocery shopping. We go to the local Aldi that opens up at 9 a.m. Well, this morning we got there a little early, around 8:50. We pull up about 3 cars away from a silver SUV and the driver, Boomer McDouchebag, from here on out, shouts out his window, "Hey folks, you got about 10 more minutes." I reply, "Yep, thanks," and roll my window up. Boomer goes back to reading his newspaper. Well, about 5 minutes later, I glance up at my phone and see the employee unlocking the door a little early, so I grab my bags and husband and I casually headed for the door. Boomer McDouchebag must not have seen them unlock the door because he sticks his head out the window and screams, "Miss! Miss!" At this point, I turn around and he says, "I told you they don't open until 9! I said, "Yep, thanks," and kept walking towards the door, the whole time Boomer yelling, "Ma'am! Ma'am!" When I got to the door and it slid right open and I walked inside, I glanced back to a very red-faced Boomer get out of the car and slam his door hard. He looked absolutely pissed. He barrels in, finds the employee that opened the door and gets in his face and screams at him, "You open at 9! Your door says 9! Your door does not say 8:55, it says 9! I am always the first person here! Always!" I literally just said, "Jesus fucking Christ," to my husband, and Boomer looks at us like we're the crazy ones and screams again, just in case we didn't hear him, "They open at 9! At that point, his wife shuffled in behind him and says, "Gerald, that's enough. Let's get our things and go." So the whole time we're shopping, Boomer McDouchebag is flying through the aisles, dumping as much shit in his cart as fast as possible. Right before he gets to the checkout, a family with 2 small children and only about 10 things in their cart gets in line before him. He throws his head up towards the ceiling and absolutely screams, "Ugh! Oh my god! Oh my god!" The wife just starts casually putting their things in the conveyor belt like it's no big deal that her 7-year-old husband is having a fucking meltdown like a toddler. As we got to our car, we just caught a glimpse of him fucking peeling out of the parking lot, tires screeching and everything. I literally cannot comprehend how that guy has not died of an aneurysm or a heart attack yet. I could basically see the veins in his temples popping out of his head. Needless to say, we'll now be going grocery shopping at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. My guess would be is this guy has an obsession with being not only the first one in the store, but the first one out. And because he couldn't have that and, someone got in the store before him, he lost his damn mind. That also explains why he lost his mind in the checkout, and why he was telling everyone that the place opens at 9 and kind of acting like a bit of a puppy guard. This man has very clearly never had to have been patient in his entire life. Contributions sad, 5655. Boomer prompted me to stop volunteering. Boomer story. I'm Gen X. For nearly 25 years, I've led Sunday morning birdwatching walks that were co-sponsored by the local park district and a birdwatching club. They were mostly fun, but then a change started. These type of walks were always a draw to an older crowd. It's the nature of the hobby. The original old-timers were always very polite, curious, willing to learn, and respectful. Over the last 10 years or so, the nice old-timers have been slowly being replaced by boomers. Now, I regularly deal with loud, opinionated, selfish, obnoxious, clueless, and rude people. Climate and science denial is available in droves. It's gotten crazy. Please don't block the trail for their park users. Please don't throw stones at the owl so it'll look at us. Poor owl. Yes, the joggers are allowed on this trail. Please stand to the right. No, I can't call the bird back because you want a better photo. Don't yell at the birds. That's not going to make them come back. Yeah, I'm okay with the hawk eating the squirrel. I'm not going to make it stop. Everything needs to live. Seriously, make way for other trail users. Stand on the right. As in to the right side of the trail in the direction we've been going. Can you take that phone call away from the group? No, I don't want to hear about Trump. No, I don't agree that evolution is a lie. I accept science. Stop throwing things at the animals. Please stay on the trail. Those are sensitive plants you're trampling. No, I don't agree that climate change is a hoax. Just look at the changes in the bird ranges. Yes, it is possible to stay on the trail, make room for other users, and not trample the wildflowers. The trail is 8 feet wide. No, I don't believe in Noah's Ark. Or is it possible we don't have unicorns today because the tigers got hungry? Every walk suddenly had one or more people ruining the experience for everyone, including the wildlife. I finally had it. What was once fun is no longer fun. I turned in my resignation. I'll go birdwatching on my own from now on. The employee at the park district was very nice about it. They've been losing volunteers in other areas for the same reason. It's just sad. Edit. Adding this to address some of the comments about the park rules, breaking the law, and banning participants. The park wants to be very inclusive. They don't want to kick people out. They don't want to ban people. They don't want to be confrontational. If someone on the walk is breaking the law, including throwing things at animals, I'm supposed to report it to the rangers. The problem is that brings the entire walk to a grinding halt. We have to go to the closest parking area to discuss it with the ranger who was dispatched. Most of the time, unless the animal was actually injured or killed, or there was some kind of serious crime against another person, the rangers are just going to talk to the person, sternly warn them, and tell them to go home. Nothing more happens, so it's not worth reporting. It's what the park wants. I don't make the rules. I just show people birds, attempt to educate them, and try to be entertaining and informative. The parks do have a sheet with people banned on it. There's a copy hanging in the volunteer office space at the nature center. The photos are small and grainy. One guy was caught selling drugs at an activity. A couple of others physically attacked somebody, and there's about a half dozen creeps who can't keep their hands to themselves. I couldn't recognize any of the people based on those tiny photos. If any of those actions happened on my walk, I would definitely call the rangers. It definitely is really sad to hear that someone is giving up essentially what was a hobby of theirs, and one that involved volunteering because the people they were volunteering for were disrespectful. They weren't being paid for that. They were taking time out of their day to do something nice for other people, and there was, well, no respect for that. This actually does kind of break my heart on a personal level because back in high school and college, before I moved to Colorado, I used to do a lot of volunteering in Idaho. I used to volunteer at an ELS center. I used to volunteer at the food bank. I used to volunteer at the youth ranches that were down in Idaho. If you've been to Idaho, you know about the Idaho Youth Ranch. Honestly, my favorite volunteer place was actually a place called Computers for Kids, and I was essentially working as someone who would both scrap computers and, wipe drives and just do a bunch of just tech stuff, essentially, and that revolved recycling computers. It was a lot of fun. And I've really been itching to get back and do volunteer work, but stuff like this definitely kind of makes me hesitant to want to jump back into it. Wandering Scout. A. Boomer parents come to visit to escape a heat wave. B. Promptly undo every measure in my house keeping it cool while I'm at work. C. House gets unbearably hot. D. Somehow this is my fault. Boomer story. So, I love my parents, and fortunately they're not the usual tantrum-throwing Fox News zombies we've seen on here, but this cracked me up. We live in the same state, about 2 hours apart. It's usually a good 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler at my place, and neither of our places have air conditioning, as we live in the USA's Pacific Northwest. It usually hits high 80s for a few weeks in my city, but with keeping the blinds and curtains drawn, the windows open during the cool nights, fans, a mister, and the furnace set to cool, where it blows non-heated air throughout the house. With good insulation, the cold night air usually lasts throughout the day, and my house stays at 66 to 72 even during the hottest parts of the summer. They don't do well in the heat, so they come to visit for a few days. I couldn't get off work for their first day, so I'm gone all day. It's supposed to hit 102 degrees Fahrenheit, where they're at, but won't break 85 here, even for the peak of the day, and then it'll drop into the mid-60s in the evening. For those of you who are Europe-pilled, that would be about 39 degrees Celsius. Imagine my surprise when I come back to a house that's 86 degrees inside. It's actually hotter inside than the outside air temperature of about 82 degrees. Like, what the fuck? Every window has the blinds not just open, but pulled up, and the curtains thrown back. Why? It was so dark in here, you needed natural light. Yeah, and the fucking sun turning my place into a greenhouse. The windows are open. There's zero breeze, so the trapped cool night air is long gone, and there's no benefit from breeze, and the hot outside air is just seeping in. There was no fresh air. The vents are all closed, meaning no air is circulating. It was so loud! They're both practically deaf. I have no idea what they're talking about. Same reason the living room fan was turned off. It's an expensive bladeless Dyson I got as a gift that's ninja quiet. Nope. Too loud! The plastic airflow deflectors were all removed from the floor vents and piled up on the dining room table. We kept tripping over them! You'd have to be Solid Snake sliding against the wall to come anywhere near them. The furnace is actually on. To heat. What? It's so confusing. There's a digital thermostat. You just press function to choose between heat, cool, and off, along with a desired temperature for heat. That's it. You really should have researched how to properly insulate this place before you moved in. At this point, you're entirely justified to walk them through like a kindergarten lesson and go through. The sun is hot. We keep the blinds closed because it keeps the heat from the sun out of the house. We open the windows at night. Give them a bit of an instructional tutorial as if they were 5 years old, because if they're going to act like children you left home alone, then they should be treated like children that you left home alone. Not to mention, if they really want a natural light, they can just do something crazy and open the front door and go for a walk outside for a little bit. That way, when they get too hot, they can come back inside where it's nice and cool and not a complete disaster to live there. And also, they get their full natural light, all their vitamin D they want, without compromising the entire coolness of the house. I suppose they could feign ignorance and just talk about the fact they didn't understand what all the measures in place did, but at the same time, they actively dismantled his home and put it on the dining room table as some kind of sadistic trophy. Like, come on. TK 42,967. Boomer called the county on me and got forced to run a septic line. Boomer story. This was a few years ago, but reading of the story made me remember it. At the time, I lived in an unincorporated township. I had an issue with my French drain setup to my sump pump in the basement. The water table was so high out there that any hole deeper than 3 feet would start to fill with water. With my French drain clogged, it caused some standing water in my side of the yard. A puddle was on my property. One Sunday morning, this boomer sees me outside and tells me I have raw sewage on my property and I need to fix it. I explain it's clean water from my sump pump and went on about my business. About 2 weeks later, I had a note from the county asking me to give them a call about the standing water in my yard. I called them back and the guy says the neighbor called saying I had raw sewage sitting on my property. I asked him if he took a sample and tested it. He replied that he had. I asked if it came back as sewage. He said no. He asked where the water came from, and I explained it was from my sump pump and I was shopping for contractors to come redo the French drain. He tells me 2 interesting things. 1. It is perfectly legal to have clean groundwater on the surface of my property. 2. Because I have a storm drain in my front yard, I can contact the county's engineer's office and they'll come out and install a drainage adapter into the storm drain that I can connect to the drain line from my sump pump to. The best part is he tells me that his neighbor still has a septic tank and was notified a decade ago that he had to connect to county sewage. His little temper tantrum about the standing water probably cost him about 10 grand to connect to the sewer line. My only problem with the standing water is mosquitoes. As long as you got the mosquitoes handled, we're good. I'm not going to have any complaints. But if you're not dealing with that, we got to have a conversation because that is... Oh, that can cause some problems. But if it's not sewage and it's just on their property, then the boomer shouldn't give a shit. But he does because he likes to be in other people's business. He has to have his grubby little hands all over everything. I do appreciate the wonderful irony that by him getting his grubby little paws on your business, it did end up with the unfortunate outcome for him anyways, that your problem was suddenly solved while he ended up with a $10,000 repair bill, or I guess maintenance bill? Would this be a repair bill, a maintenance bill, or just like an add-on fee? Renovation fee? I don't know. Either way, 10 grand up the drain. Or out through the sewage in this case. March Embarrassed 353. Boomer parents haven't spoken to my 4-year-old girls. Boomer story. My parents are boomers. My dad is 64 this year, my mom is 61. I never had the greatest relationship with them, but I thought that would improve when my wife, 39 female, and I, 39 male, had my twin girls January 2020. They haven't spoken to them one time. They've made no effort to make a phone call, FaceTime, visit, nothing. They don't even attempt to contact my wife or I to ask how they're doing, ask for photos, nothing. Once a year, we get a $100 Old Navy gift card. On Father's Day, I sent my dad a text. He historically responds with a one-word response such as cool or nice. We were moving across the country on Mother's Day, so instead of his usual nonsense, he said, "You could have wished your mom a happy Mother's Day." I was a day late because we were driving through the desert at the time. I lost it. Not only have they never wished us a happy Parents' Day one single time, they haven't contacted my kids. I unleashed 4.5 years of rage, asked why they don't care about their grandkids, etc. His response was boomer-esque. "Oh, how dare you? You're so rude. We're so easy to get along with. We give you space. We know you're busy." The gaslighting starts. I asked how that's the case for almost 5 years. Then comes the deflection. "I tell people all the time how proud we are of you guys." Cool, Dad. I'm glad strangers know that you were proud of us, but my kids don't know they have a grandpa. I'm so mad rehashing this. I know that my generation and millennials are probably very well aware of this, but it's one thing to tell someone else you're proud of your kids, but it's an entirely different world to tell your kids that you're proud of them. Strangers don't care. They're like, "Oh, cool. I'm glad that your family unit is structurally sound," but your children? If they don't hear that, they're just gonna think they're a disappointment. They're just gonna think that they don't actually matter. They're gonna think that they're nothing to you, or that you're constantly judging them. Now, this doesn't mean to shower them like every day, "I'm so proud of you, son," but even just once, it can mean the world to someone. I also had no idea Parents' Day was a thing. That's news to me, honestly. But onto the bigger picture of everything, it sounds like they're just incredibly self-centered and really just do not give a shit about the fact that you have given them grandkids, essentially, which is a little odd because most boomers seem to be obsessed with that, but at the same time, I guess they just can't be damned to pay attention to anything that isn't themselves. Hence why missing Mother's Day by a single day led to a complete meltdown, while the fact that they've probably never wished the children a happy birthday and are completely absent from the grandkids' lives is very, very, very telling. Like, I know when I was born, my grandma couldn't be kept out of the delivery room. She was pretty much knocking down the doors of the hospital in order to see her new grandchild, but it definitely boggles and kerfuffles the mind that they're just completely uninterested in being a part of their child's lives. Cheese Weasel. Drunk boomer keeps woman trapped in bathroom because he wants to be her hero, and more. Boomer story. This happened a few years ago at a housewarming party, and to this day is still one of the most boomerish things I've ever witnessed. A friend's mom had just purchased a home and hosted a small gathering to celebrate. Amongst the guests were the host's younger sister, 40-something, and the host boomer, 60-something, male coworker. The boomer showed up early and was already noticeably drunk by the time the other guests started arriving. My friend and I were already there to help with preparations. When the sister arrived, the boomer was smitten with her and started dropping cheesy pickup lines. She was clearly uninterested and uncomfortable, but did her best to be polite and not embarrass or offend him. He was oblivious to the social cues while continuing with his creepy act. After about half an hour of tolerating him, she excused herself to use the restroom. This is where things got really interesting. A few minutes passed and we heard some knocking and shouting. The bathroom door lock was jammed and the sister could not get out. Just the hero opportunity Super Boomer was looking for. He made a beeline for the door and started forcefully twisting away at the knob, but it wasn't budging. In spite of his ineffective attempts, he wasn't letting anyone else get near the door to try to open it. He just stood there with his hand on the knob while insisting he would rescue her, and implying that she would owe him once he did. This went on for over 40 minutes, and he even wanted someone to bring him a chair so he could sit down while fighting with the lock. Thankfully, no one did. As luck would have it, his earlier indulgence caught up with him and he had to pee. The other bathroom was upstairs and he reluctantly stepped away to relieve himself, but not before reassuring the trapped sister that he'd be right back to rescue her, and insisting that no one else attempt to open the door as we don't know what we're doing and we could just make things worse. Once he was out of the way, my friend and I had the door open in under a minute. Turns out the hinges were a bit loose, allowing the door to sag enough to bind the latch. By lifting the knob while turning, it opened right up. Super Boomer returned just in time to see Free Sister hugging and thanking my friend and I for getting the door opened, and he was pissed. I told you not to do anything till I got back. As if he was making any progress, my friend's mom, being the good-humored saint she is, offered to get herself trapped so he could rescue her. The laughs at that were too much for Super Boomer's fragile ego. He left abruptly and the rest of us had a great time rehashing the whole fiasco. Bro literally expected her to come out after being rescued and go, "You've won this hole," and go home with him. Oh, buddy. Honestly, I have no idea what to add that's just not already obvious beyond belief. I mean, hell, he just sat there holding the doorknob in place, saying he was going to rescue her while blocking everyone else off. Dude was literally her dungeon keeper in this scenario and expecting her to give him a reward once he freed her from the clutches of the dreaded bathroom. Bro is straight up goober-pilled. Slippery Tom. My kids are going back to school in less than 2 weeks, and they haven't seen their boomer grandparents once this summer. I have two 13-year-old girls. When I was their age, I practically spent my entire summer at my grandparents' house. I cut their grass for them, I helped with their landscaping, I helped cook dinners, and my grandmother helped teach me how to cook. And my grandfather taught me a lot of practical skills, including woodworking, house maintenance, etc. The last time we saw my mom was my kid's birthday, in March. My in-laws we've not seen since Christmas. My mother lives in a private neighborhood on several acres with trees screening them from the road so no one can see their house. Yet, she obsesses over her landscape. She spends pretty much all of her free time working on her landscape, spending money on fresh mulch, new plants, etc. No one but her and her boyfriend can see it. Every time I try to make plans or suggest we stop by to visit, she's always too busy. She has to cut the grass or mulch or cut new edge lines or something. They have 3 spare bedrooms at their house set up for visitors. My children haven't stayed at their house since they were infants. And my in-laws are the same way. All of their kids are out of the house. They have 3 bedrooms in their basement sitting empty. My girls would love to spend time with their grandparents. A few months ago, we asked my in-laws if they would consider watching them for a few hours so my wife and I could go out to dinner for our 15th anniversary. Sorry, our dogs don't do well with strangers. Strangers, was the response we got from my mother-in-law. When I was a kid, my grandparents literally argued over who was going to spend time with me. My maternal grandfather was miffed that he lived further away and got to see me less than my paternal grandparents. When he was alive, he would drive down several times a year and pick me and my sister up for a long weekend. I've even tried addressing this with my mother. After several years of failed hinting around, I finally just straight up pointed out how her and my dad had dropped me off at my grandparents every single weekend so her and my dad could go bar hopping and fuck off. And now it's time to pay that piper. Nope, I was told how rude and horrible I was and that I shouldn't expect her to do anything. Well, my kids are almost high schoolers and about past that age where they'd want to spend quality time with them anyways. They're going to be shocked when they want nothing to do with them. A couple of shitty Christmas presents isn't going to buy their love at this age. I'm not sure what they expect, but I'm saving all of these text messages for in a few years for when they're retired, less mobile, and start asking why no one comes and visits them, so I can remind them that they made their bed and now they can lay in it. Honestly, it sounds more like your parents just have a history of being selfish. I would say you're definitely right to save those screenshots and collect them because there will be a time where their selfishness catches up with them and they expect to be treated nicely, and if that is the case and their selfishness continues, they're going to learn that you can't just keep taking and taking and taking, that if you're going to take, you also got to give. It's got to be an equal transaction when it comes to how you interact with your family. Now, of course, there is an argument to be made that you are coming off as entitled to their time, which is kind of a weird fucking statement to make when it comes to their grandparents, but at the same time, if that's the bed they want to make and they want to live in, I mean, they can do that. But, hold them to it. If they don't want to be in their grandkids' life, then that's on them. When no one comes to visit them, that's something they've got to deal with. Just keep collecting those text messages, and the fact alone that they've referred to your kids as strangers is fucking wild. David Parmet. Boomer thinks me checking my messages is funny. This happened a few years ago. My mother, who has since passed away, was in the hospital. My sister, who lived near her, was at her bedside, texting updates to our other sister and myself, so I was pretty much attached to my phone. I was waiting for the elevator in my building when I got the alert for an incoming message. So I checked, and it was another update from my sister. I was still reading it when the elevator doors opened, and I walked in. The only other person in this elevator was an old biddy I affectionately referred to, even before this happened, as Hatchet Face. She always seemed to be offended by something, like the increasingly ethical, diverse families moving into our building. Hatchet Face took notice of me staring at my phone and started to laugh. I gave her my best what the fuck face and asked her what was so funny. She said, "You people always staring at your phones." My mood went from bewildered to furious. I spat out, "I'm reading a message from my sister about our mother who's in the hospital. I'm really glad you find my mother in the hospital be funny." Since then, when she sees me in the building, she walks the other way. She's definitely the best response for, a female boomer, but if it's a male boomer, if you really want to fuck with him, and if you have this kind of interaction, just tell him the stock market crashed and you're watching your portfolio drain. Or something along those lines. Just give him like "Yeah, I just can't believe the market crashed today. The Dow's down by 1,300 points. And then enjoy the few moments that you get as the panic just sets over their face and they just have a complete meltdown in the elevator. I also think the whole, "Oh, you kids on your phones," I think that's rooted in jealousy if I'm going to be honest with you, because, who wouldn't want to have access to the entire outside world, every piece of information known to man, be able to call, contact, text, or message any person you want to who you know at a moment's notice and the swipe of a finger. I think they're just jealous they didn't have access to that when they were our age, and, they just kind of take it out on us by, bullshit like this. Merrick Lord. Boomer yelled at me because I refused to break the law. Boomer story. Well, today was a fun day at work. Part of my job is to refill propane tanks. Part of that is inspecting them to make sure the date on the tank is good, since the tanks themselves are only good for 10 years. So something like 01-8 is invalid because it's considered expired, but something like 07-17 is good because it's still valid until the next year, 2025. Pretty simple to understand, right? It's simply out of safety because a bad tank can cause plenty of problems. And it's relatively easy to get a tank re-inspected, so it's good for another 5 years after its inspection date. This customer comes up to me wanting to refill his tank. I inspected his tank and saw that the date was around 0406, so naturally, I explained to him that it was not a good tank and that his options were either a refund, a new tank, or telling him where he could get it to get recertified. It would be against the law for me to fill it up, let alone how dangerous it could be for them too. Most customers I've dealt with are understanding, but not this guy. Immediately, he starts screaming at me a wide variety of complaints. "Fucking socialism, fucking Biden is destroying this fucking country. I can't get my fucking propane." I'm taken aback by his statement because it came right the hell out of nowhere. I try to de-escalate the situation and explain to him these laws have been in place for a long time, and it's ultimately for his safety. He's still very angry with me and demands I fill his tank. I again apologize, and before I can even finish my sentence, he says, "I don't want you to be sorry, I want you to fuck off," as he storms inside the shop to get his refund. Honestly, I just don't understand these people. How can you become this angry and entitled? I've been trying to think of something that you could retort with to kind of like, throw him off his trail, but honestly, there's not a damn thing that you could probably say to him to pull him out of his mind beyond just telling him a blatant lie of, "Well, actually, sir, these laws and policies were put in by Trump for your safety." His tone would have switched by 180 degrees right then and there, and he would have been thankful for them, but that's assuming, of course, you'll be able to get a word in the first place. I mean, hell, truth being, you could tell him it's against the law, you would be liable for it, and on top of that, you could get fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know what the exact fine would look like for this, but, you could tell him all of that, and he'd be like, no, it's fine, I won't tell. But then if the tank malfunctions and something happens, you bet he's going to be coming back to you and lying and saying that you sold him a faulty tank. I mean, there's no winning with this. Overall, though, part of me does wonder if the hair trigger response by a lot of boomers is because of the lead paint poisoning. Like, I've met plenty of boomers who are well-tempered and pleasant people to chat with, but every now and then you do encounter one that, it's just they have a ticking time bomb in them and the slightest little thing is just gonna set them off and suddenly everyone's a target. Icy Purpose, 4990. Lady came all the way to my job to confront me after I hung up on her. Boomer Freakout. So, I have a lot of stories of boomer foolery from my years of working in retail, literally enough to write a book, but this is one of them. I used to work in the cosmetics department for a very popular brand. We were always busy and some days were non-stop. So this particular day was during the holidays, and I remember being behind the register with a crazy long line, along with other clients waiting to be helped, makeup appointments arriving, etc. This lady calls on the phone and is asking about a product from a different counter. I tell her I don't work for that brand, but I can transfer her over. She goes, "No, I don't want to be transferred. You can walk over there yourself and tell me if they have said product." I tell her every department is separate and the person there will assist her. She completely disregards everything I said and repeats that I need to personally go over there and check. I also tell her that it's slammed at my counter and I couldn't even leave if I wanted to, because I have clients waiting. I'm still at this point being patient and professional even though this lady is pushing it. She starts getting stern, like she's talking to a child or her own personal employee, and tells me something along the lines of, "I'm telling you to go over there yourself, and tell me because that's what good customer service is." Now I'm getting pissed off because in the time that I've wasted talking to her, she could have been transferred and already know if they had what she wanted. You also aren't going to talk down to me like I'm beneath you. It's clear she just wanted to be demanding and unreasonable, and when I see that's the intention, I'm not going to play their power games. I tell her, "Okay ma'am, I'm transferring you now." She starts asking me for my name and I tell her I'm not giving it to her. I transfer her, hung up the phone, and try to assist as many clients at the same time as I can because there are even more people waiting now. About 20 minutes later, I'm behind the register with a never-ending line of people. I see this one annoyed-looking lady who resembles the leprechaun from those horror movies come stalking over to my department, and she's just looking for trouble, I can tell. Don't ask me how I knew, but I had a gut feeling that it was the lady from the phone earlier. She comes up to the counter, but not to where she is with the people waiting for help. She comes up to the side of the counter like you would if you just wanted to ask a quick question. I kid you not. She turns her head to listen to each of the workers behind the counter as we're speaking to customers so she can figure out who it was she spoke to on the phone by our voices. Now, I knew it was her for sure, and I was in disbelief, and honestly amused that this lady, who was too important to wait for a call to be transferred to the correct department, somehow had enough time to physically come to the counter to confront me. I'm watching her from the corner of my eye, but don't acknowledge her. By now, my coworkers have noticed this woman and her weird behavior, and I tell them I'm pretty sure it's the crazy lady who called earlier. Leprechaun lady isn't saying anything, just eyeballing us and leaning in to hear us talk. Eventually, she points at me and goes, "It was you!" I look at her disinterestedly and say, "Excuse me?" She says that I'm the one who wouldn't help her on the phone earlier, and she wants my name, the number to corporate, and to speak to a manager. Mind you, we're still slammed with customers, and everyone is looking at her making a scene. I kept my cool because that was making her even more angry that I was being so nonchalant. I tell her now that she is here, she can go check the counter herself for her product. I also let her know that I'm still not giving her my name because her behavior makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable, and that if she doesn't get away from me, I'm calling security. By now, she has pretty much everyone in the vicinity looking at her crazy, and I guess she decided not to push her luck and finally left in a huff. That was one of the most ridiculous encounters I had at the job. She clearly had too much time on her hands and wanted to use it to go cause problems. I can only imagine the issues she causes everywhere she goes. I've heard rumors and tellings, and I don't know how true this is, of boomers who will specifically go out of their way to cause problems with corporate and just essentially file as many complaints as possible and find the smallest thing to lose their mind over, just so they can get some kind of coupon or voucher to save a couple dollars. Now, while I don't know how true this is, but if there was ever a candidate to be a perfect poster child for this exact tactic, I would say it's probably her. Honestly though, that is really damn creepy that she just stood there eyeing everyone down and listening in with her head rotating like she's some kind of like... Ugh. Honestly, she'd be a really good spirit Halloween decoration. AEW for life! Boomer at the dog park asks for my boss's cell phone number. Boomer story. The dog park seems to be the only place I encounter these fun people. Today, there was a boomer with an older golden retriever that clearly was not super happy about being around a bunch of other dogs. Just stood still next to a bench and then would half snap/bark at any dogs that ran by. His dog eventually got into a scuffle with someone else's dog. Shit happens, they're dogs. But this guy proceeds to absolutely rip into this lady with about every curse word I have ever heard. I can't even type it coherently because it was just a stream of F word after insult. Keep in mind, his dog started all of this. Me and another guy stepped in for the lady, and the boomer got real defensive real fast, acting like we were attacking him and his dog. After a few "I'll call the police" threats, this grown-ass adult man, who has been on this world for probably 60 plus years, looked into a stranger's face in a public dog park and proceeded to say to me, "What is your boss's phone number? This is unacceptable." I just replied, "I don't work at the dog park, man." And he looked really confused and proceeded to head out of the park. I don't really know what else to add here. At first, I was trying to understand why someone would react that way. Now I just think it's funny. Edit, you all are so much more clever than I am. Bro really just pulled out the "I'm gonna tell on you" card. Damn, dude. What's he gonna do if the person turns out to be self-employed? Like what's he gonna do then? Because his entire power dynamic he wanted to have with the person just doesn't work in the slightest. "Oh, you're your own boss? Well, then give me one of your clients' phone numbers." Actually, sir, I don't have any clients. Like, I'm of course in a unique position where this would be really fucking funny, and he would probably lose his shit finding out that I'm a YouTuber. Trottle 11. That's not me on the camera. I want a DNA test. Hello, internet. Figured I'd share a story that happened to me a couple years ago. I was working night shifts at the front desk of a hotel on weekends. It was a large one, very close to the local train station in a bigger city, so it was always rather busy. The hotel had an integrated bar. I usually was alone at the front desk, and this happened shortly after I began there. Anyways, let's get to it. So, I was doing some paperwork at the front desk while attending to guests. It was shortly after the start of my shift, probably around 11 p.m. A guest came up to me and informed me that someone had just stuck a chewing gum below the front desk. So, I have a look and, yeah, there was fresh bubble gum sticking there. Now, for context, if you ever work nights, you know how mentally taxing it is, especially when you start. The lack of sleep and the changes to your rhythm make you angry and irritated. So, while I could have just cleaned it and moved on with my life, I was out for blood more than I usually would have been. Expecting it to be a child that could use the lesson of cleaning up after themselves, I asked the guest who it was. She informed me they went up into the hotel bar and showed me who it was. I was surprised to see that it was a group of 4 boomers. Seriously? But she was sure it was her. Okay, well, this just turned awkward. I decided to play it cool, went up to the culprit and simply asked her if she by any chance forgot something at the front desk. She sternly and angrily replied that she didn't and for me to bug her off. Okay, Karen, you had your chance. Karen, I know you stuck a bubble gum under my desk. Go and clean it, please. She starts screaming at me. How dare I accuse her and lie? Embarrass her in front of her friends. She threatens to call the police for ruining her reputation. Well, I was certainly realizing this wasn't going anywhere, so I just simply replied, okay, sure, go ahead. I have it on camera just so you're aware. She again insists she'd never do anything like that. Getting annoyed, I just say, okay, sure, and leave. I had shit to do and honestly wasn't in the mood to have Karen go ballistic. So I clean up the bubblegum and go back to tending guests. Now, that should have been it. It wasn't. About 15 minutes later, she comes back with all 3 boomers. She demands to see the camera footage. Now, you might think, okay, why would anyone be so dumb? Well, I guess she thought I was bluffing and she could play it off that way. Naturally, I pull up the video of her in full HD, reaching into her mouth, pulling something out, and reaching below the desk where said gum was. The 4 stare at it. I can see that 2 of them are visibly uncomfortable. But Karen and what I assume to be her husband are not done yet. They both go ballistic and start accusing me of faking the video, trying to frame them. She then starts brabbling that I need a DNA test to ensure it's really her. Both were full on screaming at this point and making a huge scene. I had enough and informed them that I'm going to call the police and will cancel their rooms. I told them to go pack their belongings. They weren't having it. So I followed up with my threat and called the police. So the police arrives, annoyed and upset they have to deal with it. They help them pack and escort them out. And that's that. Karen fucked around and found out that day, and I had to go through a dozen hoops with reservations to sort out the mess of kicking guests out, but that was totally worth it. I can't even imagine being told that I was caught on camera doing something, and then they let me off the hook. Then I go back and be like, ha, prove it, I bet you can't. And they prove it. That'd be really embarrassing. I can't even imagine what she was going through, but I do imagine that what probably happened was that she was like, oh, I would never do that. And the friends were like, well, yeah, let's call him on his bluff. Let's show him that, his lies aren't going to actually do anything because he just wanted to embarrass you. And in the process of being pumped up by her friends, she probably thought that she was sly enough to not be noticed by the cameras and it wouldn't look that obvious. And, made the mistake of asking to see the footage that showed her being caught in 4K. Snazzle frazzle. Boomer crashes our private movie screening, then tries to get us kicked out of the theater. Boomer Freakout. Browsing the sub has reminded me of an encounter that happened back when I was in college. At the small town where my college was located, there was a small independent movie theater that had the option to rent out one of their screens for a private showing, and that's what me and my friends did for a birthday. So we've all settled in and the movie's begun for about 10 minutes when we hear the doors open at the back of the theater, and in walks this couple that appears to be in their 60s or 70s. They walk up the stairs right over our row and, without hesitation, tell us that we're sitting in their seats. We try to tell them politely that they're mistaken, but we can't even finish our sentence before the guy explodes and starts screaming at us to get up out of their seats, calling us all sorts of insults. This goes on back and forth for a minute or so until we're finally able to ask him, amidst all of his screaming, if he noticed the giant sign in front of the door that said private event, which caused him to stand there fuming silently for a moment before literally stamping his foot like a toddler and storming out of the theater with his wife, making sure to slam the door as he walks out. We thought that was the end of it, but about 15 minutes later, the movie stops and the lights come on, and the manager of the theater comes in saying that someone told him that we were in here doing drugs, destroying the seats. After convincing him that was not in fact what we were doing, he starts the movie again and everything else went smoothly. Edit, please stop commenting that I should get a refund. In hindsight, my friends and I should have, but this event happened 5 years ago. And yeah, hindsight is indeed 2020. There's a lot of things they could have definitely done in this situation, but that's not going to change what happened. I do find it wild, though, that someone would lie about something so easily verifiable. I guess when the consequences are non-existent and they can just get away with making someone's day a little bit worse, especially when they were just embarrassed by said person. May as well, right? Goddamn, dude. Maybe they just walked into the wrong theater room and that's why they demanded the seats, just not realizing what was going on. That's like the first thing that I can think of how they screwed that up that badly. Like when you go to a theater, it's like, yeah, it's theater 7 on your right. Maybe they misheard him and went to their left instead, something along those lines. That's the only justification that I can really think of for this exact scenario because, I mean, the only feasible reason I can think of is that either he thought he could strong-arm his way into a private event, or they snuck into the theater and then lied about their seats, hoping to get the best seats in the house in order to watch the movie for free. Those are the few options that I can think of how this scenario would have happened and why they would have been put in this position in the first place, but all of them are just kinda... none of them make them look good or reasonable in any format. And the fact that he immediately turned around is like, they're doing drugs. They're trashing the seats. What a goober. Asleep at the world. Boomer gets yelled at by police after investigating. Major crash. Boomer story. I was in a traffic jam on a highway. It was obvious that there had been a crash up ahead somewhere as there were tow trucks, police, and fire trucks going past. Everyone was diverting into a single lane to get through the chaos. As I neared the site, a police officer stopped the car in front of me and had a word to them. I couldn't hear what was being said, but assumed they needed to clear something as the officer then blocked the road with his police vehicle. It looked like we'd be stuck for a bit, but whatever. For all I knew, they were scraping a body off the road. Everyone is waiting, and then I notice a car coming up to my right. It's a four-wheel drive trying to nudge its way through the barricade. When he realizes he can't get through, old mate decides to get out of his car and insert himself into whatever chaos might be going on. Off the trots with his slippers over socks, right into the road where the workers were trying to clean the debris off the highway. Hands on his hips, he approaches one of the tow truck drivers. They don't say much, he just keeps standing there in the middle of the road, workers trying to avoid him with their brooms. Eventually, I see a police officer come and say a couple of words to him quietly. Then, the police officer is yelling at him to get back into his vehicle and just stay there. Old mate throws his hands in the air and shakes his head as he shambles back to his car to wait. I wonder if he just expected if he asked the officer nicely if he'd be able to cut in front of everyone and, not have to wait for the traffic. Just, ask nicely, put on a pretty please, because it's a person of authority and you'll be able to make it through. But he didn't like the answer he got and instead threw a bit of a tantrum. I don't know, because I really can't think of a single other reason for someone to approach an active, ongoing, cleanup scene for an accident that could involve possible death, and to essentially confront the officers the way he did. That is a recipe for disaster and at the same time, just sheer entitlement. JJ Jones, 8170. Boomer fucks around and finds out at a Trader Joe's. Boomer story. I have a love-hate relationship with this sub, but sadly it's my turn to tell a story about a boomer who pushed me too far. This happened a few weeks ago. I ran into Trader Joe's to grab a couple things before the weekend, and one of the things I was asked to get was a specific kind of soup. Lentil, if you're curious. TJ's was moderately busy, but for some reason the seasoning/soup aisle was nuts. I waited my turn, and when I was up, I scanned the shelf for the lentil soup. I didn't see it, so I got down on my haunches to scan the lower shelf. Cue Boomer proceeding to hit me with his cart. I wasn't paying attention, so I thought it was an accident, so I looked up and said, "Oh, sorry, I'll just be a second." To which the Boomer responded by saying, "Move it! You're too slow!" ramming me with his cart harder. I looked at him and said in a calm voice, "Do it again and you'll see how fast I can actually move." He got this smug look on his face and proceeded to ram me with his cart even harder. At this point, I saw the Trader Joe's associates moving towards us, but I was pissed. I had a kind of shit day, so I stood up and mule kicked the cart into his midsection, sending him to the ground. Now, to be honest, in retrospect, I am not proud of this, and recognize that not only was my response disproportionate to the offense, but I could have also injured this guy seriously. He was in his late 70s, early 80s, and slightly overweight. I'm not a big guy, I'm 5'8", 210, but I do run, work out, and generally take care of myself. The TJ associates helped him up and told him to leave immediately. He sputtered and pointed at me, and one of the associates just said, "We saw the whole thing, so please just leave." Reluctantly, he left and they approached me. The one gentleman introduced himself as one of the assistant managers and said, "We saw everything, but next time, please just come get one of us." I asked, "Do you need me to stick around to make a formal report? I.e., are you going to call the police?" He responded, "Nope, this guy has a history of coming in here and being rude and obnoxious to other customers, but nothing like this. We'll have to talk to the manager and get him banned." I thanked them, paid for my groceries, and left. When I recounted this to my friends, over half of them had stories that were similar, like what the fuck is wrong within some people? Hey, in your defense, you outlined that there would be consequences if he did it a third time. He smirked and did it a third time. Now, if he did it once and you turned around and immediately mule kicked him, I think that probably would have been a little bit too far. But the fact that he did it 3 times with a grin on his face after you had warned him, yes, it was probably a bit disproportionate, but at the same time, he kind of actually did ask for it. The bigger question is, did you ever find your soup? Because that's kind of the more important part of this. Did you get your soup or did you forget about it after sending the boomer possibly back home with his tail between his legs as he rants about how rude some people are that he was assaulted and yada 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 without filling in the full story of the fact that he started it and you finished it. Muted form 4367. WTF is with boomers not checking their bank account. Boomer story. I work for an insurance agency and my parents have their house insured with us. I see that their policy is pending cancellation due to not making their payment. So I texted my father yesterday and asked if he could check his bank app and see if they took it out or not. He sends me 6 different screenshots of different insurance companies, none of which they have, charging him amounts from $12 to $28. He goes on to ask, "Is it one of these?" Like, sir, are you fucking serious? First off, what home insurance can you get anywhere in the world for $12 fucking dollars? And then he gets mad at me for not telling him sooner, as if I have access to his bank account. Then instead of checking every transaction in his last statement and making note, he goes to the bank and only disputes one of the charges. Turns out he has 24 charges from random companies. Oh, and this morning he sent me 2 more charges from another company. I FaceTime him and he just gives me the stupid ass lead paint stare. I have never lost my patience so fast. To me, it sounds like your father might be the victim of a scam, which, happens, and that's very unfortunate. However, for him to turn around and blame you for it, and then on top of that, not actually doing anything but the fact that he's actively just getting his accounts drained by multiple companies, and only disputes one of them, and still makes it your problem when it keeps happening? I mean, hell, there's a non-zero chance that he's blaming you for those transactions. Jateri. Yesterday we saw a boomer assault a minor at a lake. Boomer story. We recently picked up paddleboarding as a hobby. There's a small man-made lake about 30 minutes from our house that we've been going to. There are houses all around the lake with little inlets that let the developers stack as many houses as they can around the lake. There are a few branches and access points to the water so the public can access it. The lake is public access with signs around stating that. The lake isn't any wider than 250 feet or so at its widest point. One of our friend's sisters lives at the lake and the HOA clearly states that the owner's property rights end exactly at the water, and even if they put a dock into the water, they don't own it because it's not on their land. It was getting later in the day, so I pulled my paddleboard out and was waiting for everyone else to be done. There was a kid that I saw put a small kayak into the water and was fishing about 200 feet from where he had put his kayak into the lake, across from where I was sitting. The kid was about 30 feet away from the shoreline just fishing. At some point, an angry boomer yelled at the kid to come over to buy his property so he could talk to him. The kid paddled over there. The boomer then started to yell at the kid for fishing in the lake, called him a parasite, and then jumped into the water and flipped over the kid's kayak, with the kid still in it. The boomer was then standing over the kid and he looked like he was going to drown the kid. The old boomer is yelling at the kid, and the kid sounded like he was having a panic attack, yelling at the boomer to get away from him. Everyone on the lake could hear it. Some people from our party saw it happen and paddled their boards over there. They intervened and the boomer kept trying to place the blame on the kid for being disrespectful. One of the people from our party jumped into the lake and was able to at least find his fishing pole. However, he lost the rest of his fishing gear as the lake is pretty murky and they couldn't feel it on the bottom. A few different people had called the cops at this point. When the cops showed up, he told us that as soon as they got the call, he knew exactly which person it was, because he's constantly calling the cops on people for doing perfectly legal things in the lake. There were 8 people that offered to give witness testimony, but the officer only took 4 or so of the statements because he said that would be enough evidence. The boomer was cited for assault on a minor and destruction of property. The boomer tried to say that he was innocent because he had cameras in his yard, but refused to show the police officer when asked to see it. If living on a small public lake causes you so much stress in your life that you need to attack a kid, I don't know why you wouldn't move. What if the kid had hit his head on the rocks when the kayak was tipped over? What if the kid had drowned? I usually am not a huge proponent of harsh sentences, but I hope they don't just brush the charges off. He could have seriously hurt this kid for not being able to keep his emotions in check. It's the fucking lead paint, man, I swear to God. Well, not just the lead paint. The lead in the gasoline, the lead in the food, the lead on the kids' toys, the leads in the paint. The lead pipes the water was leaching from. So much lead, and a common symptom of lead poisoning is behavior problems, learning difficulties, lowered IQ, hyperactivity, and aggression. Lead can seriously fuck the brain up. And I do believe that a lot of these behaviors are a direct cause of the amount of lead emissions that were placed just into the human ecosystem in general while the boomers were growing up. Like, it's a factoid like this that helps explain behavior that we just witnessed, where a boomer will actively attempt to kill someone because they're fishing on a kayak on a lake that neighbors their house, and then claims to everyone that the kids started it. Knick-knack, patty-mack. Boomer demands premium hardware on a job that I did for free and paid for the parts out of pocket. Boomer story. I'm a locksmith. Since COVID, quality of hardware has plummeted on every brand. There have been multiple locks with problems with them from every company. Yesterday, I installed a knob for a baby boomer. I only charged her for the appointment and the hardware, did not charge her for labor, and gave her a veteran's discount despite not being a veteran. Well, the knob I put on was faulty. Not to bore you with the details, but it had a bad spring that allowed the knob to pop off. No, give me the details, I want the mechanical rundown, please. I completely refund her, eating the cost of gas and the hardware. She demands I replace it with a different brand. I go to the hardware store and grab a mid-level lever for her. I install it again, all of this for free at this point, while paying for the lever out of my own pocket. When I'm done, she looks at it and says, I'm not really happy with this one. I want you to go get a better one. I tell her that I'm not paying for this one out of my own pocket and installing it for free. She says she should be compensated for having to call me back out. Finally, I just tell her point blank, no. I reminded her that I'm paying out of my pocket and have a family to feed. She told me it's not her problem and I need to make her happy. I ask her if I replace it with a more expensive knob, if she feels that we should give her financial compensation on top of everything else. Without hesitation, she says yes. I think $100 should be fair. I take the lever off and tell her I'll be back. Drove off and blocked her number. Oh no, I'm gonna get a bad review from someone who was going to give me a bad review anyways. Thank God Google Reviews lets you respond, because the scathing review of the 1 star followed by, I installed it for free, bought the hardware out of my own pocket, and you complained and asked for $100 out of my pocket? Yeah, no, you're fine. Never be afraid to argue with fraudulent reviews. Make them suffer and embarrass them. Don't be afraid to get petty with boomers, because at the end of it, they're like surface level insults, and the little concoctions they can pull out in the comment section is nothing compared to the kind of Twitter shitpost discourse we deal with on a regular basis. Never be afraid to embarrass someone who's unapologetically full of shit, even if it gets you sued. One hot mess, high definition. Threatened at a concert. Boomer story. My husband and I go to see the Dave Matthews Band at the George every Labor Day weekend. It's like our annual honeymoon trip, just the two of us. My husband is a disabled veteran and has a state-issued handicap parking permit. We followed the parking lot attendant's directions and backed into the spot that the attendant was literally standing behind as he guided us in. 2 boomer ladies sitting at the back of their minivan, a row back from where we're parking, get all flustered as we get out of the car and start squawking and waving their hands in the air as they rush towards us. No! 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 You can't park there! It's blocking our view! Of what? The fence outside the venue? There's no view. Our back bumper is up against the chain link fence that's 6 feet high and has a green cloth on the other side so you can't see anything, even if you wanted to. And the magical thing on the other side of the fence? The line of people to get in the venue. My husband, as confused as I am over the ruckus, calmly says, "We're just following directions. The attendant told us to park here, so we're parking here." They keep screeching, mostly incoherent at this point, about people being so disrespectful, and no one respects their elders, and they are the ones that know how people should park. Finally, one of the ladies says, "Fine, park there, do what you want, but it would be a shame for something to happen to that pretty car of yours." My husband takes his phone out, takes photos of his car, walks over and takes a photo of their license plate, looks her dead in the eye and goes, "I've got a dash cam and really good insurance." We grab the rest of our stuff to walk away, at which point she grabs her sandwich she was eating at the beginning of the confrontation and hurls it at my husband. She missed by about 4 feet, but the sheriff that was patrolling the parking lot saw it and came to have a little chat with the old bat. The van wasn't there when we came out of the concert and our car wasn't touched. Honestly, the moment they threatened the car with damage, I probably would have told the parking lot attendant, like, "Hey, these people just threatened to damage my car for parking here." At that point in time, it'd be revealed that, oh, they're trying to watch the concert for free behind a covered chain link fence. And it would probably be handled from there, but there wouldn't be anything stopping them from coming back and keying your car. But still, getting their license plate, great move, especially when they're actively threatening. That's like, ugh. Like, thankfully, it's just stuff, but it's still annoying as fuck. Lucky you for having a convenient cop, I suppose, but at the same time, just like, damn. I do wonder if the cop wasn't there, if something would have happened and they would have tried to damage the car. And I mean, again, yeah, good insurance, sure, but there's still the annoying part of, you gotta bring it in to get fixed if it's paint damage, you gotta deal with all the hoops and hassles, the insurance company's gotta jump through a lot of hoops themselves, and you have to deal with the fact that you're probably gonna be losing time from work or have to rely on others for transportation, so it just becomes a goddamn hassle. Non-stop tomatoes. I'm currently being harassed on Nextdoor by a boomer who doesn't like my prices. Boomer Freakout! I sell tomatoes on Nextdoor, all day, every season, for like 4 years now. My prices are 50% cheaper than grocery stores, as well as being giant heirloom varieties. Loads of options and sizes as well. Now, this boomer messages me and asks for free tomatoes. I said no. Maybe I'll do reduced prices, but not free. I work hard to grow them. He proceeds to start name-calling. I think he reported me for harassment, and then made a post about how I'm ripping people off and don't buy my tomatoes. Why are boomers so entitled? They complain constantly about young people being entitled, but I only see entitlement coming from the elderly crowd. A 2+ pound tomato for $3 is a great price, LOL. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Edit with conclusion. I've had run-ins on Nextdoor with other people, and I've witnessed some very screwed up things happen to people. This isn't my first rodeo, as I've been selling on here for a long time. The mods or leads or whatever for my neighborhood are all Karens and Rebeccas, and oftentimes no one is listening to reason with a lot of Nextdoor issues. I'll not be reporting him. I will not be making a post to call him out. I'll have him blocked, I'll receive no punishment for the report, and I'm carrying on to continue to sell tomatoes. I'm surrounded by booming pieces of fuck, and I don't want to ruffle any geriatric feathers. Thank you for listening to my rant about them, but it will remain simply a rant. To those of you who want tomatoes, it's not very likely that we'll be able to meet up, and a lot of my fruits are spoken for, but if you'd like to learn how to grow your own, message me. I have tips and tricks and suggestions for different types, flavors, and dishes and purposes. Okay, this actually reminds me, I gotta make a mild correction. I don't remember which video it was in, but I made a statement that I don't stand by because I was extra tired and kind of just talking. Yeah, it is okay to rant on the internet. I think my main point was, don't rant on the internet and post to an advice board, but I don't think it was an advice board. I think I just was being a little goofy in the head. So that's my bad. I fucked up there. It's not the first time I made a fuck up with that, but that being said, if you have active paying customers who are buying at your prices and happy with them, the one person who has never bought a product, who then asks for a free product and goes, "Huh, I'm never buying from you again," and then they leave and start ranting and raving about how shit you are, yeah, they're not a customer. They're just bullshit. They're trying to get free stuff and ruffle some feathers. The worst part probably is this is probably a learned behavior. He's figured out he can get away with this with other people, so there's probably people out there who he strong-armed into getting free shit from before in the past. If you give a boomer a cookie, he'll call you entitled. If you call him entitled, he'll report you on Nextdoor. If he reports you on Nextdoor, he'll demand free tomatoes. If he demands free tomatoes, don't comply, or else he'll come back for more free tomatoes. Murray BS. Boomer's certain she had an appointment. Didn't. Boomer story. This happened to me yesterday. It's 3:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and a woman walks through the front door of my auto repair shop. After exchanging pleasantries, she says, "I have a 3:30 appointment for a state inspection." This isn't unusual, but generally, I look over the schedule for the day when I first get to the shop in the morning, so I have an idea of what jobs need to be prioritized, how much pressure we're going to be under, etc. And I didn't recall seeing someone on the books for 3:30. So I go ahead and pull open the schedule, and sure enough, I haven't got anyone in the 3:30 spot. So I apologize and have the following exchange. "Yeah, I don't have a 3:30 appointment." "Oh, yes you do!" I'm looking at my schedule and there's nothing in the 3:30 slot. I tell her this as I turn my screen around to show her that my appointment book indeed does not have anyone scheduled for 3:30. "Well then one of you idiots must have forgotten to put it in. I called yesterday and they put me in the 3:30 slot." That's unlikely since I'm taking bookings for state inspections a week in advance. That's how solidly booked I am. Did you happen to catch the name of who you talked to? "Oh, it was definitely Justin." "We don't have a Justin that works here. Maybe you called another location?" "No, it was here. I demand to speak to Justin." "That'll be difficult because there isn't a Justin here. What phone number did you call yesterday?" The old bag whips out her phone in a huff and basically shouts the phone number at me. I don't recognize it, so I Google it. Turns out the number she called was for a different shop across the town that has a name nothing like ours. So I tell her, "Yeah, that phone number is for insert shop name here," which would have been enough for most normal, sane, and unleaded people. But nay, she doubled down. "I know the appointment is for here. I set an alarm and everything, and I don't make mistakes." At this point, the customer service is irrelevant. Well, evidently you do because the number you called doesn't go here. She goes ballistic in my lobby in front of about 4 other innocent bystanders, threatening my job, saying she knew the owner and he'd have her back on this. I shrugged and walked out of the office into the shop. Observed her a few minutes later on the phone in the parking lot, presumably with her husband, screaming about how dumb and incompetent we all were, and then she got in her car and left. She predictably left a bad review, and the owner of the shop reviewed the camera footage to see what I'd said that had enraged her so badly. I'm in the clear, and we all had a good laugh about it. Too long didn't read, woman makes a scene because she doesn't make mistakes, but actually isn't infallible and made an appointment at the wrong shop that isn't mine. Again, don't be afraid to confront people in reviews, especially if it's something like this. Honestly, what you should have done is just had her call the place in front of everyone and put it on speaker. Just like, okay, if you're sure that the number that you called is in fact this shop, then call them again. And when the location picks up that's not your location, then you kind of have the ace in the hole right there. Especially because you can make her ask for the address of the other shop and then just watch as she realizes that she fucked up in that moment and enjoy the satisfaction of her walking out with her tails between her legs. I say tails? Like she has multiple? I mean, sure he doesn't have one, but multiple, huh? Damn. White pine burning. We have no buffet here. Boomer's story. My guy and I have a favorite Asian restaurant around the corner from us. We drop by a few times a month because the food is great. The servers are so kind. And the owner always stops by the table to sit with us and talk. It's like going to a friend's house. We stopped by last Thursday for dinner and we saw a "We have no buffet" laminated sign on the door. When the owner came over to chat and we asked her about it, She took a deep sigh, rolled her eyes, and pulled up a chair. Apparently, since she opened the place 25 years ago, people have come in expecting an Asian buffet. She's never had one. People looked around, saw that it's a small place and no buffet, and they leave. She said that's changed, however. She said she's been getting a continual stream of those old people who check in with the hostesses, are shown to a table and given menus. The server comes over with flatware, water, and tea. She gives them a minute and comes back. "We'll have the buffet," they say. Nowhere on the menu is a buffet listed. Look around at the 8 other tables and 6 booths. No buffet. The owner says that these folks always come back with, "What do you mean you got no buffet? All Chinese places have a buffet." They have a tantrum, get mouthy with the server, occasionally getting racist while they're at it, and storm out. But it doesn't end there. Even with the sign, the owner says she still has boomers read the sign, approach the hostess, and ask, "Why don't you have a buffet? The sign says you don't have a buffet." So for me personally, I hate buffets. And a lot of this stems from the fact that I'll just call her my grandmother, on my mother's side. To give you an interpretation of how the relationship is, I will oftentimes refer to her by her first name before referring to her as my grandmother. But for the sense of privacy, I have to bite my tongue on that. She is a buffet addict, specifically spending most of her time within Golden Corral. Now, for those of you who aren't American and don't know the septic wasteland that is Golden Corral, it's hell. I can't even begin to describe the hellscape that is that restaurant. It's an American food buffet with Americanized items like, well, I don't even remember what they fully have, but they have a lot of shit. Like, a lot of shit. And every time my grandmother would visit, I would end up going to Golden Corral and usually end up getting sick. It got to a point where I pretty much was guaranteed to be drinking a bottle of Pepto-Bismol every single time we went there. And because I was a child, I couldn't exactly say no, and would be scolded for not wanting the meal provided, which was Golden Corral. I have a very firm and fond memory of one of the first times going in there of seeing some 8-year-old with an entire slice of pizza, dunking it in a chocolate fountain and then eating it right there, licking his fingers, then putting his fingers in the chocolate fountain, getting burned by it, and then licking his fingers. It is a very firmly placed memory in my head, and ever since then I have hated buffets with a passion. I also hate buffets because I don't trust other people, and when it's open food, I don't trust that. I know some motherfucker reached in there with their bare little piggies and grabbed like an entire slice of chicken, touched everything else in there and just put on their plate, and now the entire thing's contaminated. The only buffet I'll tolerate is maybe a pizza buffet, but that's still pushing it in my eyes. Anyways, the boomer obsession with buffets, I do not understand it. Especially with the fact that if you want like good Chinese, good sushis, really good any kind of food, a buffet's not your option. If you want a quality meal, go to a place with a menu. If you just want to gorge yourself, go to a buffet. I'm the Atari. Boomer at the pharmacy. Boomer's story. I just went to the pharmacy to drop off a prescription. There was a boomer behind me. As soon as the pharmacist came to the counter to help me, Boomer joined me and put her purse in the counter, not 2 feet from me. I said, as it's a bit of a private moment talking to the pharmacist, "I'll just be a moment." She said, "It's all right," and stood there, looking at us and listening. I said again, "Sorry, I'll just be a second." And again, she said, "No problem," and didn't move. Pharmacist started asking questions, and I said, "As we have no privacy, can I write down the info?" Pharmacist said, "Of course," and gave me a pen and paper. Boomer, "Oh, it's totally fine. I'm not listening." Then move, lady. Have you no idea how to move a few feet away to give people some space? Fletch rant over. Edit, I talked to the actual pharmacist and he was fuming. He said that never should have happened and he apologized profusely, and then talked to his staff right then and there. I've been going there for about 10 years and have never seen him angry like this. I'm glad I said something. "I'm not listening," she says, while interjecting as you're actively complaining that someone might be listening. Well, if you're not listening, then how did you know to make a comment about you not listening, huh? Could it maybe possibly be the fact that you were in fact listening to a otherwise private conversation that should be between someone and their pharmacist, especially if it's about medication that should be delivered in private and could be possibly a little embarrassing or publicly taboo to be getting? Huh? Also, most pharmacies have chairs for you to sit at while waiting. Why does she need to stand next to the counter? It's so weird. Just if someone sits in a chair, if someone else walks up, just make the comment of, hey, by the way, I'm up next. I'm just sitting down right now so I can rest my legs. And 9 out of 10 times, possibly 99 out of 100 times, people will respect that and they'll understand and they won't be like, nah, you're out of line, so therefore I'm next. Most humans don't act like that, except for, well, possibly boomers, but hey, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code ODDS at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code ODDS directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code ODDS at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.